Uh, Dr. Moody, we are live. Are you ready to kick this thing off?
Ready, I'm ready.
Let's do it.
KTTV, giving you what you need. Motivation, education unleashed. H-Time representing, we forever keep it rolling. Join the conversation with inspirational stories. Thought-provoking, feel that energy. Kendrick Thomas aiming to lift the community. True indeed, tune in, come and see. Giving you what you need. KTTV, let's go. Hey, KTTV. Hey.
Hey, what is KTTV? This is KT, and I'm coming at you live with another episode of Education Unleashed. And on tonight's episode, I have, let me see here, what we gonna say? Counselor? Can I say counselor? Therapist, consultant, businesswoman, and Louisiana native, Dr. Janice Moody. How you doing tonight, Dr. Moody?
I am good. I'm excited. I'm really excited about this conversation. So thanks for having me.
Look, I want to say thank you for taking some time out. As we know, time is the most precious thing that we will never get back. So I appreciate you spending a good hour with me tonight. As we do dive into a topic that is very, very important, is very real, and it's ever going. I'm seeing as we look into our education system. So any way that we can make it better for the future, I'm all with it. All right. So before we jump into that, I like to get into a little news because a lot is going on in our world in education. So let's check this out. Let's see it. So in tonight's news, as we jump into the Dr. Moody, did you have to worry about getting them loans repaid or anything like that?
Let me tell you, won't he do it? Yes, he will, and he did. Okay.
And he did. Look.
Crazy
So what they have going on? I thank God we was in that number. But right now, as they just talked about the SAVE program, I think they did something a few days ago where they were promoting it. Republican states filed a lawsuit challenging Biden's student loan repayment program. So when I read this story and looked into it, what they're saying is the program that the Supreme Court denied ain't nothing changed. He just came back, gave it another name, put the same stuff in place, and started taking off more loans. And so Republicans say they will not go for it. And so the lawsuit filed, like I said, on the same day of action to promote the SAVE plan, filed in Kansas by the Kansas Attorney General. Don't surprise me. So this was a repayment plan that he dropped in 2022. And like you say, won't he do it? I'm not gonna lie to you. Look, how long did it take? Did it take you a while? Were you in agony waiting?
I was not. I was not. I'm gonna be honest. I just started claiming it after 4 degrees. I was like, "Look, Jesus, somebody gonna have to do something because I don't know what's supposed to happen with that." So I didn't agonize about it. I hadn't had the agony came when I got the first bill right after grad school. I had the panic attack, fell on the floor. But after that, I was like, "Okay, we'll have to see," because something, Y2K didn't snatch it. It's like, all right, Jesus got a plan he ain't told me about because.
Look, I thought it was over for the YT.
Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I was like, somebody gonna mess
look,
my numbers up. Yeah, I'm gonna need somebody.
Look, we thought it was everything finna roll back to zero.
Right.
Let's go. But so hopefully people were fortunate. I think the biggest thing was about just making sure you got that information in, followed up. Because I remember they moved it over to Mohila or something. So when that happened, I said, Lord, it's on the way.
Yes.
And I think it was January, maybe 2 years ago. I got that. Oh my God, I got that letter. I looked, I had kept checking because I thought something was going on, but it was really a zero for like a long time. I said, we have arrived. But yes. So, but the thing is, I really don't see why they would try and stop what's going on. I guess because hey, that's what they say. Well, we paid for it. Ain't nobody paid for us.
So there, but you would, if you think about the people who populate the Congress, for the most part, a lot of them are like parts of corporate entities who were like the biggest recipients of welfare, period. Don't open up the can and start having a conversation about the PPP loans and who got the largest amount of forgiveness. If you want to have that conversation. The other thing is that if we consider how big the burden for student loans has been, the reality is that has kept a whole lot of people from being able to actively participate in the economy and actually access the American dream. Now, what it might do for their benefit is continue to keep people without access. If you're burdened with debt, then there's a lot of ladders that you can't climb. And the thing is, not only does that help a whole bunch of, let's say, more working, even middle and upper middle class people, you know, we're dropping now because of what inflation is looking like. The thing is, a lot of these people benefit, and they do have access to a better quality of life now because of that. And the credit is going to go to Joe Biden.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to people who are looking for reasons to not vote for him, of course, you know, we had a lot of the experience of the obstructionist governance when I'm not gonna say Barack like we friends, because I like we friends. But when Obama was in office, they were just intent on not governing. They were intent on not governing because it's like, okay, well, we're gonna stop everything. You're not gonna be able to get anything done. Then when everything crashes, it'll be your fault. So I think a lot of it has to do with that too. And they don't want representation or for things to be better for folks who in the middle, who essentially carry the rest of the country.
Most definitely. I'm with you. I am with you. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully they won't win. Hopefully at least they'll bounce it in court long enough to kind of get a few more people over that hump because like you say, that is one of the biggest reasons. I remember getting ready to buy a house and we had everything locked in, and that's what it was that stopped me from getting it because DTI. So it stopped me from getting the down payment assistance anyway. So I had to just pay cash out of the pocket. So luckily I was able to, right? But you think about the people who don't have that situation and they want a home. Now they don't, you know, I mean, and to get like 2 weeks away, like if you didn't have that, you crushed now.
Right.
You know, so we'll see what happens. Good luck to them.
Yeah.
Hey, all right. So what we'll do, let's take a quick break. When we get back, Indoctrination in Education. I am very looking forward to this. We will be right back. And we got Dr. Moody in the Oh, Dr. Moody. There will be random air horns coming through. Probably
That's good.
Good. All right, let's go. We'll be right back, y'all.
You see the drippy, I'm fitted up. Hop in my car and the giddy up. Secure the bag, yeah, I get the bus. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. You see the drippy, I'm fitted up. Hop in my car and the
Hey, look, we got boss lady, Miss Robinson. Say hello, Dr. Thomas, and I love it. It's all right, Dr. Janice Moody. You already know we in the building. Shout out. Shout out, boss lady. Oh, director. I'm sorry. Big shout out, director in the building. All right, so here we go. So, Dr. Moody, for the people that don't know you, people in the back, before we jump into this conversation tonight, give us a little bit of background on you and your current role in psych and education and all of the above.
Okay, well, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and let me just kind of lend some context to that. I'm a psychologist, and I am, not only do I racially identify as Black, but culturally. So the lens through which I see and understand the world has a whole lot to do with that particular reality. If you were born and raised in the United States, then you know we have a racially socialized context, i.e., you got to have the conversations about your kids, about why you can't do the same things that perhaps their mainstream peers can do. All of that's to say that I'm in psychology in the interest of helping to increase access to culturally responsive services, primarily for us. Other minority populations as well, but primarily for us. The other thing is that it's about 0.000.1 of me. And when it comes down to being able to do the work that we need to do, there aren't enough of us. So I've also been in education trying to train the next generation of psychologists in order to be able to do this work in a way that's actually going to benefit us and not harm us. That's not going to contribute to maintaining the status quo or false narratives, that kind of stuff. So right now, I'm in private practice and I see a bunch of clients, private practice. In addition to, I do consultations for folks who are looking for stuff related to diversity and multiculturalism. My emphasis area is multicultural community clinical psychology. So it's us, it's other diverse stuff, it's systems that are non-traditional, and providing services in a way that are not just the regular traditional go sit down in the office and talk to somebody. So that catches me in research. I am currently teaching grad students adjunct at Howard in the counselor program in psychology. And I find myself all over the place doing community mental health education, motivational speaking, developing programming, workshops and retreats and things of that nature for specific groups, for issues that are kind of unique to those groups, i.e. Black women's mental health. And I've done a bunch of stuff on Black men's mental health as well. So trying to fill in the holes that we need in order to address a lot of the issues that are more specific to us. So, yeah.
Man, I was just thinking, like, you know, the people who be talking about those retreats, I feel like some people may cry when you're in there, but you're going to get it out of them when you come to those retreats. So I feel like you're just that type of person. All right, well, good. Thank you, Dr. Moody. You know, I always kind of put everything in the context and let people know it's not just people that I have on who got the book sense about this, but people who actually live in this to bring credibility to that, so that we you can really take something away from this podcast. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. So when we're talking about indoctrination, you know the word I'm trying to say. Thank you, God. What is it? First, let's talk about that. What is it defined inside of the educational context, and what are the implications of it?
Okay, so indoctrination is, in essence, teaching somebody to believe something that they have not critically analyzed or that hasn't been supported by anything. So, for example, if I came up and just told you something about, you know, a specific group of people or a specific type of vehicle, you don't have any reason to believe it if there's no substantiating information, but to discourage you even being able to disprove that, and to just kind of take whatever belief or idea that I have as an actual fact with no critical analysis at all. Now, in the context of education, if we consider that, first of all, you got to consider that education exists in a social context. So there are norms, ideas, and beliefs that the mainstream kind of endorse and push that exist outside of these institutions. And the larger context is also, how that moves is also informed by the agendas of the government. Now, if there are certain norms and ideas and beliefs, values that are pushed by the government is responsible for the Department of Education. The Department of Education shapes what curriculum and what teaching looks like. Then it is not in their benefit to be inclined to shape people to question what the agenda of the social norms are, not generally. So when it comes down to, you think about over the course of the past couple of years, I'm gonna say it's been more than a decade. There's been a decrease in the endorsement of critical thinking, such that people just take information at face value, but they take it like it's the gospel without asking any questions or anything about it. And that has implications for how people show up in a larger social environment. So you have institutional indoctrination, where you have institutions that are set up to endorse any number of ways certain beliefs, and, you know, basically govern themselves in accordance with the idea that because we believe it and there shouldn't be anything to challenge it, it just is. That there shouldn't be any challenge, nothing to challenge it just because we said it is. So that exists not only on individual levels. You think about, we got people who, for example, cultists, and I'm not going to call no names, who have people who just believe what they say because they said it, don't challenge anything. And we have things that also exist on larger systemic levels. You think about it, for example, law enforcement. the ideas about how we deal with different groups of people with the same behaviors based on their demographic variables. So, and there are a number of factors that contribute to why, we show up differently. So when it comes down to the system of education, the goal essentially is not so much to endorse critical thought, because people could think circles around a lot of the people who are public servants right now, but to actually maintain the status quo. Don't challenge it. Don't challenge it. So in terms of what we learn, especially while we're coming through these particular systems, then we learn what it means to be an American citizen. We learn what we are supposed to believe. There are a lot of ideals and values that are supposed to be consistent with what's historically been considered patriotism that we are expected to endorse. The other thing about that is the fact that the United States is a melting pot with a whole bunch of different groups. And we also tend to be inculcated with ideas about the values of the people who belong to these particular groups. We talked earlier about gender roles. A lot of that stuff is blended into that too. And it's not a matter of introducing information to people. That's not the issue. The issue is introducing the information with specific values and attitudes attached to it, and discouraging people from asking any questions or attempting to verify anything, and having the expectation that because I told you, then that's it. That's what you're supposed to do. Take this information and you run with it. So that essentially becomes the problem.
Now, did you see a lot of, I guess a lot of the question, for me, it feels like a lot of people were questioning more around the pandemic time when the shots came out. You see people kind of saying, okay, no, something doesn't seem right, or I'm not doing this. Or, I start seeing a lot of the conspiracy theories videos. Did you see a spike as far as on your end with that?
Yeah, with some people having concern about what was real and what wasn't, because there was a lot of stuff that seemed out of control. We got forced to go home, sit down. And when we felt like there were other things that we had more options around, you think about it, the pandemic was something that impacted the entire globe. And it's like, we got all of these leaders, can't nobody rein this in. Then it made sense to have some level of concern about what's true and what's not, especially if you know that there have been conspiracies and lies that have come out from leadership before. So there's grounds to have been, concerned about what was going on with that, like how I should move for real.
Yeah. Now, when you think about this topic, and we talked a little bit about this before the show, but choosing this topic per se. So when I think about your role, as far as when you said what you're trying to do for future psychologists, for us as a people, what specifically made you say tonight, this is why I want to talk about this?
I live in a red state. Okay. And one of the things that I understand is that the person who controls the narrative dictates what the story is. And just like in a couple of other red states where there is an attempt to shift social studies and history curriculums for the sake of telling a story that's very different than what actually happened. I remember not having an interest in history when I was in school because I was like, this don't have nothing to do. I'm not in here. I'm not in here. And I recognize after the fact that was by design. So if you can change the narrative, you also get to shift what people's understanding of the current reality is. And it positions us as a people to re-experience stuff that we've already been through. Because you kind of start buying into the okie doke. There is an alternate reality that people are trying to get you to subscribe to on a mass scale. So the idea that DeSantis want to talk about African Americans having benefited from slavery, and Governor Abbott trying to identify African American slaves as they were involuntarily relocated, and trying to minimize or cancel any discourse that would make any that was controversial, that would make white kids uncomfortable for the sake of trying to whitewash what the curriculum looked like. That has implications for what our kids, and I'm talking about just those who look like us, but especially in a diverse environment like this, that has an implication for helping these kids to understand what really is the historical context of the relations between all of these groups of people who are sitting together? Do you know what the history of the Native Americans is here in the United States? Do you know about the Japanese internment camps? What did they tell you about slavery? Do you understand what our role was in Vietnam? So when it comes down to all of these relationships that we have across the groups, if you get to change the narrative, then you can make yourself sit pretty. Then it essentially makes you out to be a better group of people. And it helps to position you to maintain the sense of power or the position of power that they're doing a whole bunch of other stuff. So especially when in an environment where most things are centered around the reality of the mainstream folks.
Yeah. And what are some signs, I guess common signs? Let's say I'm in the classroom, right? I'm in the schoolhouse and I hear this podcast. Now I'm more aware. What am I looking for to be able to, I guess, to be aware of as far as educators and parents?
As far as parents are concerned, especially for younger kids, if you hear your kids communicate or demonstrate that they have some very rigid attitudes and perceptions about specific groups, be it religious groups, be it groups who subscribe to different sexual identities, be it other ethnicities or national groups, or even when it comes down to gender roles, especially if it's stuff that you know that you haven't taught them, then you should have some questions about where it came from. And when it comes down to what it is that they're learning, be inquisitive about what it is that they're learning, such that you can determine if whether or not they're getting a very narrow, intentional story that's shaped a certain way for a reason, or whether or not they're getting all the details. Now, in the context of the classroom, we think about it, intellectualism is a lot of what we get when we have a lot more curiosity, as opposed to just take what I give you and you just kind of internalize that as reality. So you can present information in a way that's subjective, but first of all, you need to check your own implicit biases. So you need to know that you got some and be objective in terms of what you present, but also present it in a way that encourages questions and discussion around the information. So the kids will be encouraged to not only have questions about the information that they get from you, but also to do the same thing with information that they get from people outside of the classroom. And when there is information available, present alternative perspectives and other things that might help them to have a greater curiosity about what's true and what's not, and how to substantiate that, such that they're more likely to look for validity when it comes down to somebody giving them some information and expecting them to just, oh, well, somebody said it, so it must be the truth. Particularly, again, students, kids who are members of minority populations, because essentially there is more likely an experience of invisibility or some alternate reality stories that have been told that help them to, experience oppression, racism, discrimination that tends to be associated with stereotypical stuff. So if we're paying attention to what reality is and telling the truth, and you give them an opportunity to determine for themselves what makes sense, and you train them to ask the questions so they don't fall for the okie doke just because there's somebody else who is in a position of authority in a different context.
Now, one big thing that goes along with this thinking and implanting, in a sense, is the textbooks, right, and the curriculum. So a lot of this stuff in the classroom, if you got like that teacher who is aware in these situations, they get to put this stuff in, right, like on the outside. But at the end of the day, inside of that classroom, you are bound almost by that curriculum, by that textbook. Where have you seen that as you go and work with schools, inside consulting, all of those pieces? Where do you see that most prevalent? And what subject areas?
History, the social sciences, the social, again, it's about who owns the story, who owns the narrative, who owns the narrative. I remember, not that I was here and present and paying attention at the time, but like, remember back in the day, a part of the conversation about any ethnic group or nation that was not aligned with the United States were considered, oh, they're communists. Anybody that the United States had an issue with was a communist. Like, how? And it's a matter of deciding that because they don't align with us, whether you have any questions or any proof to substantiate. Do you even know what a communist is? Like, oh no, we don't fool with the Russians. We don't fool with these people. We don't fool with them. So what comes down to it is that there is a value in a set of norms that is determined by some other people that you just don't question. You just kind of go along with it. And that when it comes down to what that looks like, again, if you don't really know what the historical relationships have been for the groups of people, then you could really easily be duped by what the current circumstances are and how we got here. Like, for example, if we see an overrepresentation of men of color in the prison system, and when it comes down to criminal behavior, if you do not know what the history of African descended people is in this country, then it might be easy for you to assume that, oh, okay, well, Black men just criminal inherently, and don't know what the reality is in terms of slavery, in terms of Jim Crow, in terms of the consistently ongoing structural and institutional racism that exists. You would know, and you would be more easily inclined to just blame it on the individuals who represent criminal activity, you know, when you kind of see it in the public. So those things can shape how we show up. It can shape how we show up. And that is one of the absolute easiest ways to do it, is, again, to control the narrative.
And now when you talking to your students, right? And let's say, once again, it's for that same teacher, then what do you tell them? How do I kind of change up the narrative inside of my classroom with the tools that I have? So what can I do as an educator?
I will talk about what's in the book, but again, I'm not going to talk about it like it's the gospel.
Yeah.
The book says, and then we're going to have some conversation about it, and I will be curious about anything that they'd want to know as it relates to that and how consistently it might align with what has been their experience, or if, you know, how much do you know about the history of your family in this particular country? Have you heard anything else about any of the whatever it is that we're talking about, and create, again, an opportunity for there to be open dialogue. Otherwise, then it kind of trains them to be more closed-minded. That's not what you want, especially not when you are in a social environment that does not have your best interest at heart. You kind of need to be able to think past 15 minutes from now, such that you can figure out what the agenda is and whether or not it benefits, so you can strategize around it. So I bring in the other extracurricular information. Like, for example, even if on the university level, the psychology that's taught here is Western. It's from a Western perspective. It assumes a Western universal reality, and how that works in terms of mental health stuff is concerned is essentially there's Western norms, and the things that kind of deviate from that are, for the most part, like pathological, like something wrong with you if you aren't consistent with this. And again, so when it comes down to us, we're not going to be like y'all, because we got a whole different background. We have a whole different history, and we operate in a very different way. So if those things can't be taken into consideration, then of course we're going to look like something wrong with us. And you try to go into therapy or whatever, and you end up with a victim blamed experience. But for me, I acknowledge, okay, this is what you need to take. You don't need this to take the exams. You're going to need this to get the degree. You're going to need this to practice and engage. But there are other perspectives. So we need to talk about them, and we need to, create the opportunity. And I introduce my classes, let my students know I'm not here to indoctrinate y'all, but I'm going to introduce you to more information and give you the opportunity to determine for yourself what makes the most sense with the work that you're trying to do. And so we're going to talk about all of the pieces. I'm going to bring in all of the extra stuff. I'm going to bring in the extra stuff as opposed to the cookie cutter stuff. You need this to pass the exam. You're going to need this to get licensed. But let me tell you what's real going on over here, and to encourage folks to research the researcher. Who said this, and why might they have benefited from it or not?
Yeah. Almost like you say, that fine line between promoting critical thinking or indoctrinating.
Yes.
Yeah. So how do I show it? And I think you already told us a little bit about it, but just promoting that critical thinking, I think, is so important inside of their classroom. Because like you say, it's one thing to get this information, because they will load you up.
Yeah.
You think about all the critical race theory, and now they're trying to, there's so much that's going on with all these pieces. And so if we are not aware, and if we're not stepping out and doing the research on our own, I think we're going to lose a lot of people.
Yeah.
Man. Okay. And so have you had any pushback with this? Okay. All right. I was just going to ask because, it's you got to wake up, like, listen, do something different. So you say you have had pushback?
Yes, you do get pushback. The thing is, when you challenge the status quo, then something is going to change and it's going to be uncomfortable for some people. And the unfortunate reality is that even for some of us, it's uncomfortable, because if you start rattling the system and mixing things up and the higher ups get upset, then there could be consequences for a whole bunch of different folks. And it's like, man, leave the people alone. Just leave the stuff like it is. When my loyalty is not to maintaining the status quo, because I don't know about y'all, but they don't work for me. My people, I know we suffering as a result. So there's something that needs to be switched up. And my loyalty is to the truth. So people need to be exposed. Again, I'm not going to tell you how to feel about it, but I'm going to give you access to the information and encourage you to ask the questions on your own. So again, you don't fall for the okie doke and be out in the streets looking like Herschel Walker or Tim Scott or somebody. And so particularly for us who have something to lose by buying into the systems that have maintained these systems of oppression for us, then it's like you actually contribute to the system, the maintenance of it, if you just continue to go with the flow. And we can't afford to do that and expect for things to become different from us. And you have to understand that if there are people right now, like people like, man, I ain't voting. Do you understand how all these people working trying to keep you from having the option or the right to vote? There must be some value to it. You should examine that. Oh, we're getting ready to change up the whole curriculum. You can't teach this in schools no more, and DEI, everything. We get ready to cut it off. Well, maybe it was starting to level the playing field, and maybe some people were losing traction. You might want to look into why folks feel like it's something to change the narrative or to decrease access. So to encourage folks to start paying attention to the things that are happening in the environment and what the implications might be for us. But you got to be real with yourself about what your position is in all of this. So you need to know how you have to move.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question. Let's say, for instance, I want to do something, right? And so where do I start? Man, do I start in my community? Do I start in Austin? Where do I start if I say, I'm tired of the indoctrination, we got to do something different for our babies?
The first thing is, don't let the school be your child's first or last teacher.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Please. All right, I just had to get that in. Please don't let them be the first or the last. Woo, you're going to miss something. Okay, all right. Sorry about that.
No apologies necessary. Don't let the school be your child's first or last teacher. The world that our children have to grow up in is, again, not particularly designed for their safety. You think about it. We went to school, in elementary school, and they're teaching you to sing the Star Spangled Banner. You sing the Star and with liberty and justice for all, except it ain't justice for all. It ain't liberty for all. For some, not for you though. Not for you. Yeah. But you standing up there all loud and proud because what they had said was, and the Bill of Rights, because except that it's not for you. It's not protected for you. They weren't even talking about all of the mainstream people. They were talking about white male landowners when they wrote this stuff. So the thing is, there is a level of education that we have to give our kids that allows them to plant whatever they get from the mainstream system into that. But it is not, and it does not allow it to shape reality for them, such that, again, the environment that we live in, where Houston is one of my most diverse cities in like the entire country. So you got a bunch of kids who come from a bunch of different backgrounds who might all be in a classroom together and say, like, my son goes to the school up the street. So you walk into school but let something happen and the police pull over the Rainbow Coalition. First of all, my child's 6'7". Who you think they're gonna pull out the group first? You need to have an understanding of what your reality is in this context and how you need to move. What you rep, just your phenotype before you say anything, before you do anything. what your physical presentation represents in this particular context. So our kids need to have an understanding of what that looks like going in. And it's best for us to keep up with what it is that they're learning, how they understand it, how they're integrating it, so that we can catch the foolishness and challenge it before it's something that they learn later that they told us the police was supposed to help us. Mm-hmm. But it helps some people, just not all of us. They might not. Why you might need to be scared. Why? So yeah, there are things that we need to do, and we need to be intentional about having a completely different educational process. That's what I was talking about when I'm talking about racialized socialization that shows you can't go in this particular neighborhood, and it don't matter if you're riding with this person, or there are different ways that you have to talk to the police that your friends might not be able to talk to them like that. So being able to give that to the younger folks so that they know how to protect themselves, or at least minimize harm and danger, then that's one of the best ways to deal with it. And if you're in a school and you got access to the kids, pull them to do extracurricular stuff, or challenge them and introduce them to other, they like media stuff. Get the music that they're listening to. Ask them to introduce you to the things that they're listening to, and sit down and do some analysis of some of the stuff. Yeah. What do you think they meant with this? What do you think they meant when they said that? What do you think about, this that he said, or what she's talking about? And you can get an idea of the things that they're concerned about, and offer some information that might challenge their perspective on some things. Because they always need to be looking at something from a perspective that is consistent with their reality. Consider others and know that you're in an environment that's working, not necessarily in your favor, but you need to be honest with yourself about what really is.
Now, I know you talked about the program at Howard. Mm-hmm. But what about Graham? Do you have any connections? Is this type of thinking going on? That have you any connection to the program like that?
Not yet. And I tell you what I learned while I was in Graham. Actually, my questions about the indoctrination in education started as an undergrad, and I was taking a history and systems class, and I'll never forget. They were talking about the history of the psychology, and I was just thinking psychology was psychology, not thinking that it was, this is a very narrow perspective. And I remember one of the people who stood out to me was Sir Francis Galton, who was a eugenicist. And eugenics is basically the belief that primarily minority groups of people, and it was us, are inherently deficient. Like, just because you Black, then you are unintelligible and you are an inferior minority. And some of the statistics, he developed a lot of statistical assessments, and the intelligence tests were developed on the back of his work. But his goal was to prove that African descended people were a biological minority. Biologically, hold up. This is in all of I got some questions. It came to my awareness that there was a group of us who were, we would fight the power, the little militant ones. And we would be pulling the extra information from all kind of places all over, for folks who weren't a part of the curriculum, but who were essentially Black psychologists. And it's like, okay, I came across the Association of Black Psychologists and joined, but nobody in my department, and I was a department sweetheart. Nobody in my department knew about it. I thought y'all were the Black psychologist. How do you not know about this? And that's what helped me to understand that this is a Black school, but the board is in a red state. So the curriculum is Western. They didn't know about that. So they couldn't tell us about what they didn't know. So we had to go on these fishing expeditions to learn about this additional information that would help us to make better sense out of how to work that stuff out. So since then, there's been some changes. I had a friend of mine who was a chair, but who's not anymore. He left. And I'm trying to figure out now, especially now with there being more online programming going on, how to connect some of that with some of the current programming in Grambling now. I just haven't been able to tie those pieces together as of yet since the administrative change. But yeah.
Man, come on now. Just double checking, because we need that in Louisiana. Because like you say, it's Texas, Louisiana, red, Western, and a lot of people, they just going with what they tell them,
Yeah.
And it's real, especially at the house. It's real down there.
Yeah, it is. It is. all the more reasons that there are more barriers to breaking into some of the systems that will allow you to do some of that work. I've had some of those experiences like earlier on in my career with trying to do the work in, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So now, are you doing anything in H-Town? As far as consulting with schools and working with some people, have any schools reach out and said we want to get better in this? If so, what does that look like?
You know what? I'm not working with any schools here in H-Town right now. I'm not.
Okay.
My stuff has primarily been, most recently, I've been, as far as my consultation stuff is concerned, it's been in program development and helping people to develop programs that they're using in other organizations and agencies for the sake of trying to increase this wellness stuff for populations that look like us. That and the mentorship, of course, because if I've got students who are graduating, then we're trying to figure out how to get them to be working in capacities that'll help us to actually make more of a significant impact in the community. So there are those particular pieces. I'm not on a school anything yet. I'm gonna say yet.
Yeah. Hey, the power of yet.
Yeah. I'm gonna say yet.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So good, so much good information tonight. The biggest pieces though is, like you said, teach people to think critically. And so if they do that, even though you're going to tell me this, you put the question of why inside of their head, right? Ask somebody, all right? Don't just take it for face value. And so as we get ready to wrap it up, any last words, any thoughts on just tomorrow when you get to your classroom, do this?
Yes. Encourage the students to want to have an understanding of perspectives that are different from their own. Because if you can do that, then you can understand the positions and perhaps the motivations of the people that you're sharing space with. If a lot of the people and like you talked about history and reading literature too, if the folks who end up being heralded as heroes, none of them represent anybody or anything that look anything like you, then let that be a sign that you need to be, again, asking questions about the people who are in power. What's your relationship to them? And when people are giving you information, why might it benefit them to be giving me? How is this going to help me? How might it help them? Such that we're capable of being able to make informed decisions on how we move in systems that are not necessarily set up to benefit us. Maintain that inquisition, research the researcher, and encourage the students to ask the questions. Whatever opinion you have is valid, but understand that there should be some level of credibility such that you don't take stuff at face value, make it fact, and have the expectation that, oh, okay, as I walk out in the universe and govern myself in accordance with that other people are going to do the exact same thing. It is, though liberation is, information is liberation. Your truth is your liberation, though it's not always cute, but it will always help you to be able to make the most informed decisions and the best decisions for yourself. Encourage that. Encourage that.
Now, how do we find you? How do we know more about the work? Maybe sign up for your class, all of that stuff. Talk to us, Doc. How we find you?
Okay, so I have a website. It's www.drjanicemoody.com. You can get some information about what I do in my practice there. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Dr. Janice Moody and also on Facebook. So in terms of some of the stuff I have going on, then yeah, I tend to post a lot of the stuff there. So get familiar. Yeah, and there's also a YouTube channel in the works too, because it's a lot of stuff that just needs to be out there and it just hasn't been, to encourage folks to have these conversations that help to enlighten us. So yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So do you have anything coming up, speaking events, any place that we need to check for you?
I'm trying to think that I can even think of this week. May 4th. There is a watch. I'm gonna tell y'all to check my Instagram. My Instagram and Facebook within the next week. There is a mental health summit that my chapter does every year, and I'll be talking about exercises to deal with stress and anxiety. Yeah, literally help you to bring it down. Get your chest, make your chest stop hurting. Yeah. Keep you from catching the case. Yeah.
Man, please help me.
Yes.
All right. All right. Well, I want to say thank you again for coming on, for giving us some of the good information. For me, it's always, I love the live conversations, but then going and getting those sound bites and those clips, when you drop them, man, that be that part. Because with such a short span, we got 60 seconds, right? And so I gotta get you in. So being able to kind of share that, I look forward to doing that. And I just want to say again, thank you, Dr. Moody, for taking some time out, for coming and gaming us up, dropping that reel, and representing the boot oh so well. Graham,
thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation that counts, specifically for all of us.
Most definitely. Yeah,
most definitely. All right, y'all. Okay.
Hey, we got to do it. We got to make it happen.
Yes.
Hey, all right. Shout out to Mr. Hall, man. Big shout out to Warren, man. That boy be in the game. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
All right. Look, this is KT for KTTV signing out. 100.
This is Darnell with Broadcast Houston.
This is Dr. Tamara Beckford.
Hey, this is Candace.
This is London Underwood.
This is Kirsten Bass with Inner City Greens, and you're watching.
Y'all are now tuned in to
KTTV.
KTTV.